A gate agent's worst nightmare isn't a delayed flight, it's the passenger they underestimate. For one agent at Atlanta's busy airport, a day that started with petty power trips ended in professional ruin. She saw a black woman in sweats and decided she was a problem. She called security, intending to humiliate her. But what she didn't see was the small, leather-bound wallet. She didn't realize she wasn't talking to a passenger. She was talking to the one person who could shut down her entire operation with 6 simple words. This is the story of how a single FAA badge brought an entire gate to its knees. Dr. Evelyn Reed was tired. It wasn't just the 5 a.m. flight from D.C. to Atlanta, nor the lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. It was a bone-deep weariness, the kind that settles in after too many reports, too many near misses, and too many nights spent in sterile Marriott hotel rooms. She was an aviation safety inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration, a title that sounded impressive at parties, but translated to a life of anonymous vigilance. She sat near Gate A21 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest travel hub on the planet. The air was thick with the smell of Cinnabon and anxiety. Evelyn was in observer mode, a state of professional camouflage. She wore grey joggers, a comfortable, slightly worn Howard University sweatshirt, and a pair of high-end sneakers that hinted at a salary her outfit belied. Her hair was pulled back in a neat, intricate braid. To the world, she was just another traveller. To herself, she was a loaded weapon safety on. Her flight, Transatlantic Air 415, to London Heathrow, was already a hotbed of minor chaos. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read, Brenda, was ruling her tiny kingdom with an iron fist. Evelyn had watched her for 20 minutes, watched her snap at an elderly man who didn't understand the baggage fees, watched her give a dazzling plastic smile to a handsome pilot, watched her pointedly ignore a young mother trying to ask about pre-boarding. Evelyn's file on Brenda Sullivan was already an inch thick back in her encrypted government database. 18 complaints in 6 months. Rude. Aggressive. Discriminatory. Refused to check my stroller's safety latch. But it was a pattern of procedural errors that had flagged her for an in-person undercover audit. Brenda had a habit of rushing safety checks, skipping verification steps, and, according to 2 very credible reports, overlooking weight and balance issues on international flights just to get them off the gate on time. Evelyn was the test. Her PNR passenger name record was a digital minefield. She was booked as E. Reed, flagged with a payment method query that would require manual verification. It was a simple test, a Level 1 compliance check, as her boss, Director Markham, called it. Could the agent follow a simple 2-step verification protocol? Evelyn sighed, closing her laptop. Her mission was simple. Observe board the flight and conduct a quiet audit of the flight crew's pre-flight procedures. The gate agent was just the appetizer. A sudden sharp voice cut through the din. "First class, please. First class only." Brenda shouted into the microphone, her voice dripping with impatience, even though no one was moving. Evelyn watched a black family, a father, a mother, and 2 small, impeccably dressed children approach the podium. The father, in a tailored suit, spoke politely. "Excuse me, we're in first, but I just wanted to confirm our seats are—" Brenda didn't even look at him. She held up a single manicured hand. "I haven't called first class. I'm preparing to call first class. You need to listen for your zone. Please, step back." The man's eyes widened, his dignity pricked. "I was just asking. Step back, sir." "You are blocking the boarding lane," Brenda snapped. The family retreated, the father's face, a mask of controlled fury, the mother quietly guiding her children away. Evelyn felt a familiar cold prickle on her neck. It was the same behavior detailed in complaint number 14. Evelyn stayed seated, documenting the interaction in a coded note on her phone. Subject B. Sullivan. 10:32 a.m. Demonstrates overt hostility to first-class passenger of color. Refuses procedural query. Tone unprofessional. She closed her eyes for just a second. All she had to do was get on the plane. But a knot was tightening in her stomach, a knot that told her this wasn't going to be a simple observation. The air in Atlanta was heavy, and a storm was brewing right at gate A21. "We will now begin boarding with Zone 1, Brenda announced, her voice scraping against the PA system. "Zone 1 only." Evelyn stood, stretching her legs. That was her. She slung her nondescript black backpack over one shoulder. It was heavy-weighted with her laptop, 2 encrypted hard drives, and a discreet high-resolution body camera, which was currently off. She didn't activate it unless a situation escalated to a clear-cut violation. She joined the short line falling in behind a man in a rumpled business suit. He scanned his phone. Beep. He was through. Evelyn stepped up to the podium. She held out her phone, the QR code for her boarding pass glowing. Brenda grabbed the scanner, her movements jerky and impatient. She aimed it at Evelyn's screen. Beep, beep, beep. A harsh red light flashed on the agent's screen. Brenda's face, already pinched with annoyance, tightened into a mask of pure exasperation. "Mom!" She said the word, a tiny explosion. "This isn't valid." Here it was. The test. Evelyn kept her voice level, calm. "Oh, that's strange. It was confirmed this morning. Could you try scanning it again?" "I did," Brenda snapped. She scanned it again deliberately, jabbing the scanner at the phone. Beep, beep, beep. The same red error. "Step aside," Brenda ordered, already looking past Evelyn to the next passenger. "You're holding up the line. Next." Evelyn didn't move. "I'm not going to hold up the line, but I do need you to resolve this. Can you please pull up my passenger name record? The confirmation is—" Brenda's eyes, a flat, icy blue, finally locked on Evelyn. She took in the sweats, the university logo, the braid. Her gaze was an appraisal, a calculation, and a dismissal, all in 1 microsecond. "There's nothing to resolve." "Honey," she said, her voice dropping into a syrupy, condescending drawl. "The system says no. That means no. You probably booked on one of those cheap third-party sites. You'll have to go back to the main ticketing counter and get it sorted out. Next, or—" This was the critical failure. The protocol for a payment query flag was explicit. Do not send the passenger away. Manually verify PNR against the flight manifest and contact the carrier's internal ticketing desk. "Mum, I am not going back to the main counter." Evelyn said, her voice still quiet, but now edged with a new firmness. "My PNR is redacted. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I am a confirmed ticketed passenger. I need you to do your job and find my reservation." The use of doctor seemed to infuriate Brenda. "Doctor Ho," she scoffed, a tiny ugly laugh escaping her. "A doctor of what you're not a medical doctor. Are you? Because we only pre-board for medical needs." She leaned in her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the first 5 people in line to hear. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but this is a full flight. You don't have a ticket. It's that simple." The man behind Evelyn, smelling blood in the water, muttered, "Just get out of the way. Some of us have places to be." "I understand your frustration," Evelyn said, addressing the man for a second before turning her full, undivided attention back to Brenda. "But this agent is failing to follow procedure. Ma'am, I am required to be on this flight for official government business. You are now in danger of interfering with a federal employee's duties." It was a warning, A last chance off-ramp. Brenda saw it as a threat. And to a woman like Brenda, a threat from a person she had already deemed lesser was an intolerable offense. Government business? Brenda repeated her voice, now rising, drawing the attention of the entire gate area. Is that what you're claiming? You're claiming to be a government employee in that outfit? My outfit has nothing to do with my credentials, Evelyn said, her patience evaporating. You're right, it doesn't. Because you don't have any. Brenda slammed her hand down on the counter. You have a fake ticket you're trying to push your way onto my aircraft, and now you're threatening me. You know what I call that? Evelyn braced herself. She knew exactly what was coming. Brenda snatched the red phone from its cradle under the desk, the one that connected directly to airport security. This is Brenda Sullivan, at gate A21. She spat into the receiver. I need security effective immediately. I have a hostile passenger refusing to comply, claiming to be a government official and causing a major disturbance. Yes, a major disturbance. Send them now. Brenda slammed the phone down. A wave of silence fell over the gate, followed by a rush of whispers. Passengers pulled out their phones, starting to record. Brenda crossed her arms, a look of grim triumph on her face. You really did it now, she sneered at Evelyn. You're going to be arrested. Evelyn Reed simply stood there. She took a slow, deep breath. She had hoped to avoid this. She had hoped for a simple, quiet audit. But Brenda Sullivan, in her arrogance and prejudice, had just turned a compliance check into a full-blown federal incident. No. Evelyn said, her voice calm and clear in the sudden, terrible silence. You did. The 10 minutes it took for security to arrive felt like 10 hours. The silence at gate A21 was a heavy, judgmental thing. The other passengers who had been impatient and angry were now a captive audience, their phones held high. Evelyn was a statue. She did not move, did not speak, did not check her phone. She just stood at the podium a few feet from Brenda, forcing the agent to feel the weight of her presence. Brenda, for her part, tried to maintain her air of authority. She busied herself with the computer, her fingers clacking angrily on the keyboard. This is what happens, she muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Try to maintain order, and this is the thanks you get. Unbelievable. A younger agent, a man named Tim, looked on from the other podium, his face pale. Brenda, he whispered, maybe you should just check the manifest. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job, Tim, she hissed. I'm handling it. This is a security situation. Finally, 2 airport police officers arrived. They were not the soft, blue-shirted TSA. These were armed officers, their tactical vests and sidearms making them an intimidating presence. The lead officer, a tall, stern-looking man, whose badge identified him as Officer Mark Sullivan. No relation, Evelyn bleakly noted, surveyed the scene. Who called it in? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Brenda's hand shot up. I did, officer. Brenda Sullivan, lead agent. This woman, she said, pointing a sharp, red-nailed finger directly at Evelyn, is the problem. She tried to board with a fake ticket. When I denied her, she became hostile, started claiming she was some government official to scare me, and refused to leave the boarding area. Officer Sullivan's gaze fell on Evelyn. It was a look she knew well. It was the look of a man who had already made up his mind. Ma'am, he said, stepping toward her, I'm going to need you to come with me. We can sort this out away from the gate. Officer, Evelyn said, her voice remaining perfectly level. I am not a hostile passenger. I am a ticketed passenger. This agent, she nodded toward Brenda, refused to follow basic protocol to verify my ticket. She is the one who escalated this situation, and she has filed a false report. I have not caused a disturbance. I have not threatened anyone. I have simply stated facts." "That's a lie," Brenda shrieked. "She threatened me. She said I was interfering with her duties." Officer Sullivan's hand moved toward his belt. "Ma'am, you're claiming to be a government official." "No," Evelyn said clearly. "I am not claiming. I am." "All right, I've heard enough," Sullivan said, his patience gone. "You're causing a scene. Either you walk with me, or I'll make you walk. What's it going to be?" This was it. The moment of no return. The entire gate was watching. The family Brenda had shooed away earlier was in the front row, the father watching, with a look of pained recognition. Evelyn slowly, deliberately reached for the zipper on her backpack. "Don't," the second officer, Officer Chen, barked, tensing. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Evelyn froze her hand in the air. "Officer," she said, her voice taking on a new, hard edge. "I am complying. You asked for my credentials. I am reaching for my credentials. They are in the front pocket of my bag. May I have permission to retrieve them?" Officer Sullivan nodded curtly. Slowly. Everyone was recording now. Evelyn could see the little red lights on a dozen phones. Slowly she unzipped the front pocket. She ignored her wallet. She ignored her passport. Her fingers found the item they were looking for, a small black leather case. She pulled it out. It was a trifold, simple and unadorned. "Your driver's license," Brenda scoffed. "A little late for that." Evelyn didn't even look at her. She kept her eyes on Officer Sullivan. She let the case fall open in her palm. There was no driver's license. There was only a gold-embossed eagle-crested shield and a laminated card that sat opposite it. The shield was for the U.S. Department of Transportation. The card, however, was what mattered. Officer Sullivan, who had been expecting a driver's license, squinted. He leaned in. And then he stopped breathing. His entire body went rigid. His eyes darted from the badge to Evelyn's face, and all the color drained from his. Officer Chen, seeing his partner's reaction, stepped closer. "Mark," Chen started. "Chen, back up," Sullivan said, his voice a strained whisper. He looked at Evelyn with a new, dawning horror. "What is it?" Brenda demanded, tapping her foot. "Did she give you a fake ID?" Officer Sullivan slowly raised his eyes to meet Brenda's. "Mum," he said, his voice shaking with a sudden terrible understanding. "You have any idea who this is?" Brenda looked confused. She's nobody." Evelyn spoke, and her voice, now stripped of all warmth and patience, cut through the terminal. "Officer Sullivan, please read the title on my identification, aloud, for the benefit of Ms. Sullivan." Officer Sullivan swallowed. He looked back at the badge as if it were a venomous snake. He read the words, his voice cracking. "Identification card, United States of America, Department of Transportation." He paused, then read the critical line. "Bearer, Dr. Evelyn M. Reed, is a duly appointed Aviation Safety Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration." He looked up. "And this," he said, pointing to the shield, "is her federal badge." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Brenda's face went from smug to confused to bone white in less than a second. "FAA, but you're... I'm what?" Evelyn challenged, her voice like ice. "In a sweatshirt, black A woman, I am all of those things. And I am the FAA." She snapped the wallet shut. The thwack of the leather was as loud as a gunshot in the silent terminal. The authority in the air didn't just shift. It shattered and reformed instantly and irrevocably around Evelyn. The two police officers who moments before had been ready to physically remove her took a simultaneous step back. Officer Sullivan looked like he had just seen a ghost. "Dr. Reed," he stammered, We apologize. The call came in as hostile passenger. The call, Evelyn said, pinning him with a look, was a false report, an act that in a post-9/11 airport environment carries serious penalties. But we'll get to that. Your presence is no longer required, officers. Please stand by, but do not interfere. Yes, ma'am, Sullivan said, nodding quickly. He and Chen moved to the wall, becoming, in an instant, Evelyn's silent, stone-faced bodyguards. All eyes turned to Brenda. The gate agent was trembling, her hands fluttering at her console. FAA, I don't understand. This has to be a joke. A test. This was a test, Ms. Sullivan, Evelyn said, stepping forward. For the first time, she moved past the passenger side of the podium and into the sacred space of the agents. Brenda flinched instinctively, moving aside. Evelyn was no longer Dr. Reed, the tired traveller. She was Inspector Reed, and her jurisdiction had just been invoked. And you, Evelyn said, her voice low and dangerous, have failed, spectacularly. She turned to the terrified younger agent, Tim. You, what's your name? Tim. Tim Holloway, ma'am, he whispered. Tim Holloway. Pick up that phone. Not the red one, the black one. Call your station manager. I want the Transatlantic Air General Manager for all of Hartsfield-Jackson on this gate in 10 minutes. Tell him Dr. Evelyn Reed of the FAA is on site and has invoked her authority under Title 49 of the U.S. Code. Tim's eyes went wide. Title 49. But that's the one, Evelyn confirmed. The one that gives me, as a federal inspector, the power to ground flights, suspend airmen, and, if necessary, shut down this entire gate. Now make the call. Tim fumbled for the phone. Brenda, seeing her career evaporating, found a last, pathetic scrap of defiance. You can't do this. You don't have a ticket. The system said so. Evelyn turned to her, her expression one of utter disbelief. Ms. Sullivan, are you truly that dense? The system said no, because I told it to. The red flag on my file was a compliance test, a simple payment query flag. The only correct response was for you to manually verify my PNR against the flight manifest. A 30-second fix. It was a test to see if you would follow the most basic security protocol. She leaned in her voice, dropping so only Brenda, Tim, and the officers could hear. Instead, you saw a black woman in a hoodie and decided I was a criminal. You skipped protocol, you denied boarding to a ticketed passenger, and then you lied to law enforcement to have me arrested. You didn't just fail a compliance check, Brenda. You committed a crime. From the jet bridge, the pilot who had heard the commotion emerged. He was a tall, silver-haired man with a no-nonsense look. What in the Sam Hill is going on out here? We've got a window to make. Brenda, what's the delay? Brenda looked at him, her eyes pleading for an ally. Captain Miller, this woman, she's... Evelyn stepped forward, pulling out her badge again. The pilot's eyes instantly snapped to it. His entire demeanor changed from angry boss to respectful subordinate in a heartbeat. Captain Miller, Evelyn said, Inspector Evelyn Reed, FAA. I'm afraid your window is gone. The captain paled. Inspector, I wasn't aware. Is there a problem with the aircraft? The crew. The problem, Captain, Evelyn said, gesturing to Brenda, is with your gate, with an agent who cannot differentiate between a passenger and a security threat. An agent who, rather than do her job, called in a false security alert. She turned to the entire shell-shocked gate area. Her voice, trained for auditoriums and boardrooms, filled the space. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. The sea of phones was still recording. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I am an aviation safety inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration. Due to a significant security breach and a gross failure of compliance at this gate, This flight, TA 415 to London, is officially grounded. A collective groan of hundreds of passengers. Furthermore, Evelyn continued, her voice overriding their complaints. This gate, A21, is now an active federal investigation site. I am shutting it down. She looked at Brenda, who was now leaning against the counter, her face grey. Get her off that computer, Evelyn ordered Officer Sullivan, and get me the logs, all of them. The word grounded carries a unique and terrible weight in an airport. It's a word that costs airlines millions of dollars a minute. The word shut down is even worse. Captain Miller, a 30-year veteran, was the first to grasp the full, catastrophic implications. Inspector, he said, stepping fully into the gate area. Grounding the flight, I understand, but shutting down the gate. My crew is on board. The passengers are here. Surely we can just move to another. Captain Orr, Evelyn cut him off her tone, leaving no room for negotiation. With all due respect, your agent's actions have called into question the integrity of every single procedure that has happened at this podium for the last... how many? Hours. She glanced at her watch. Let's say 6. Was the baggage weighed correctly? Were the passenger manifests cross-referenced? Were the crew's credentials properly verified? This agent... She pointed at Brenda, who was now being quietly led to a set of chairs by Officer Chen, was so busy playing queen that she failed to do her job. I no longer have confidence in this operation. Therefore, I cannot in good conscience allow your aircraft to depart. She turned to Tim, who was still on the phone, looking like he was about to be sick. Is the station manager on his way? Yes, ma'am, Tim squeaked. Mr. Henderson, he's running. Good. Evelyn turned back to the crowd. The initial groans had been replaced by stunned silence, and in some corners a new dawning realization. The black father, whom Brenda had dismissed earlier, stepped forward. Ma'am, Inspector, does this mean what she did to my family? That's part of it. Evelyn's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Sir, I can't comment on the specifics of an active investigation. But let me be clear. The FAA's mandate covers all aspects of aviation safety and compliance. That includes discriminatory practices that interfere with standard operations. Your testimony may be required. The man nodded, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. He and his family sat back down, as if settling in for a movie they had waited their whole lives to see. A man in a pinstripe suit who had been in Zone 1 pushed forward. This is outrageous. I have $1 million meeting in London. You can't just ground a flight. I'm going to sue. Evelyn didn't even turn. Officer Sullivan, she said. Sir, Sullivan said, stepping in front of the man. This is a federal matter now. I suggest you take a seat. The man faced with a badge he did understand, deflated and retreated. The unmistakable sound of a man running the frantic slap of hard-soled dress shoes on linoleum preceded the arrival of Mr. Daniel Henderson. He was the general manager for Transatlantic Air's entire Atlanta hub, a man responsible for thousands of employees and billions of dollars in assets. And right now, he looked like he'd just seen his stock portfolio evaporate. Dr. Reed, he panted, his tie askew, his face slick with sweat. Dan Henderson, what in God's name how can I help, Mr. Henderson? Evelyn said, you can start by suspending your lead agent, Ms. Brenda Sullivan, effective immediately. Brenda let out a small, strangled cry. She is to have no access to any airline system. Her credentials are to be revoked pending my full investigation. Am I clear? Yes, Inspector. Absolutely. Consider it done. Henderson looked at Brenda with a gaze so cold it could freeze fire. Brenda, go to HR, now. But, Dan, she pleaded. Now. He roared, and she finally broke. She grabbed her purse, and with one last look of pure hatred at Evelyn, she fled. "Second," Evelyn continued as if uninterrupted, "this flight is grounded. I want a full-service team here to do a complete ground-up inspection. Weight and balance, catering, fuel logs, everything. I want my team to have access to the cockpit and all flight crew." Your team," Henderson stammered. "Yes, my team." As if on cue, 2 men and a woman in sober blue suits, all wearing FAA windbreakers, arrived. They had been on the next flight, her backup. "This is ASI Johnson, ASI Patel, and ASI Williams. They will be conducting the full station audit. You will give them whatever they ask for." Henderson just nodded dumbly. "Third," Evelyn said, "all passengers on TA 415 are to be deplaned. Oh wait, they're still here. They are to be rebooked on other carriers at Transatlantic's expense. You will provide meal vouchers, hotel vouchers for anyone who needs them, and full compensation for this delay. You will not," she added, her voice dropping, "put a single one of them on another transatlantic flight out of this gate until I clear it." "Inspector, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars." "It is," Evelyn agreed, "and you can send the bill to Ms. Sullivan, or perhaps to your HR department for failing to act on the 18 complaints already filed against her. 18 complaints, Mr. Henderson, that I have on my desk. This was not a surprise. This was an inevitability." Henderson's face went from pale to ashen. He knew. He had known, and he had done nothing. "Now," Evelyn said, finally, allowing herself to sit at the podium she had been denied. She pulled her laptop from her bag. "If you'll excuse me, I have a report to file. And Tim—" "Yes, ma'am," the young agent said. "Get me a hot coffee, black, and a bottle of water. You can bill the airline." The fluorescent lights of Gate A21, once a backdrop for hurried goodbyes and vacation excitement, now felt like the sterile glare of an operating theater. The gate taped off with "Federal Investigation, Do Not Enter." Signage had become a silent, cold command center. The hundreds of passengers from TA 415 were a restless, confused sea of humanity, held back by a line of shell-shocked airport police. Evelyn Reed stood where Brenda had stood, but she wasn't at a podium. She was at a workstation. Her laptop was open, a nest of cables linking it to the airline's internal server. Her team, a well-oiled machine, had deployed instantly. ASI Patel was at the adjacent terminal, her fingers a blur as she dove into the server logs. ASI Williams, a man with a disarmingly gentle demeanor and eyes that missed nothing, was quietly interviewing Tim Holloway and 2 ramp agents over by the customer service desk. And ASI Johnson, a former A&P mechanic with 30 years in the field, had disappeared down the jet bridge with a high-powered flashlight and his own tablet. "Mr. Henderson," Evelyn said, not looking up from her screen. The station manager, his face a mottled, sweaty red, flinched. "Yes, Inspector." "Your passengers are a secondary security concern," Evelyn said, her voice crisp. "You will begin rebooking them, all of them, on other carriers, at your expense. You will provide meal vouchers for every single one. You will provide hotel rooms for anyone who cannot be rebooked tonight. You will announce this personally, and you will apologize to them for your airline's failure. Am I understood? Inspector rebooking 2888 people. The cost." Evelyn finally looked up. Her gaze was flat cold and utterly devoid of pity. "Mr. Henderson, the cost of a single lawsuit from one of these passengers for unlawful detainment, which is what will happen if you keep them here, will be exponentially higher. The cost of the fine I am about to levy against your station will make this rebooking fee look like a rounding error. You have 60 seconds to pick up that microphone before I add failure to mitigate to my report. Do it. Now." Henderson, trembling, picked up the PA microphone. His voice, usually booming with artificial chur, was a reedy, cracking whisper. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Transatlantic Air, may I have your attention, please? We have failed you today." As the crowd erupted in a predictable wave of fury, Evelyn tuned it out. That was Henderson's problem. She was hunting for something bigger. The first call came from ASI Williams. "Inspector," he said, his voice quiet in her earpiece. "You were right to flag the staff. The kid Tim, he's terrified. But the ramp agents, they're talking. They hate her. They call her Clear the Deck Brenda. They say she's been pencil whipping manifests for years, rushing cargo skipping container weigh-ins, all to get the on-time bonus." "Pencil whipping," Evelyn murmured, "falsifying records. This was no longer just a compliance issue. This was criminal." She was about to respond when her radio crackled with a different, more urgent voice. It was Johnson from the cargo hold. "Inspector, you need to get down here. You need to see this with your own eyes." There was a serrated edge in his voice that made the hair on her arms stand up. "I'm on my way," she said. Evelyn, badge visible, bypassed the stunned Captain Miller, who was standing guard at the jet bridge door. She walked down the ramp and into the cavernous cold belly of the Airbus A330. Johnson was standing in the aft cargo hold, his flashlight beam aimed at a row of massive aluminum containers. "This is a 288-passenger configuration, right?" he asked. "Correct," Evelyn said. "Then what," he said, thumping his hand on a large silver box, "is a non-revenue cargo ULD doing in Section 4A? He moved his light. "And 4B and 4C. Evelyn's eyes followed the beam. 3 massive containers marked with a different airline's cargo tag were strapped into the floor. "These aren't on her manifest," Johnson said, holding up his tablet. The screen showed the official weight and balance sheet Brenda had signed off on. "This sheet says this section is empty, ballast only. But I'm looking at..." I ran the serial numbers. "For 118 kilograms of undeclared cargo. Computers. From a charter that got delayed. She just stuffed them on." Evelyn felt a knot of ice form in her stomach. "For 100, all in the aft hold." "All in the aft hold," Johnson confirmed, his face grim. "She didn't just pencil whip the numbers, Inspector. She threw them in a fire. This plane would have flown heavy. Dangerously tail-heavy." Evelyn looked at the containers. This was the hard karma she had been waiting for. This was the smoking gun. This was the evidence that turned Brenda's petty tyranny into a front-page, multi-million-dollar, prison-worthy crime. "Document it," Evelyn ordered. "Photograph every tag, every lock, every single thing. I want this hold sealed." She walked back up the jet bridge, her mind racing. She needed the final piece. She keyed her radio. "Patel, talk to me. Tell me you have the why." ASI Patel's voice came back tight with anger. "Oh, I have the why, Inspector. I have a whole library of why. I'm in the server's back end. I pulled every security flag override from Gate A21 for the last 6 months. And Ms. Sullivan has a clear, undeniable, and frankly sickening pattern. I've cross-referenced 58 overrides. Inspector, every single one. Everyone was for a passenger with a non-anglicized name. Al-Jamil Rodriguez. Patel, funnily enough. Ngo." She saw a problematic name, a visa check, a payment query from an overseas bank, and instead of doing the 90-second verification, she just hit bypass to keep the line moving. "And the passengers with names like Smith or Jones?" Evelyn asked, already knowing the answer. "Sent to the main counter, every time, 122 of them, delayed for hours." She wasn't just a racist inspector. She was a lazy racist. She used her prejudice to decide who was worth the paperwork. Your PNR was just the one that fought back. That was it. The complete picture, a toxic cocktail of prejudice, laziness, and a God complex, all of it enabling a reckless disregard for safety that had this close to bringing down a wide-body jet. Evelyn walked back to the podium. Captain Miller and his first officer were waiting, their faces pale. "Captain," Evelyn said, holding out Johnson's tablet. "My inspector found a weight discrepancy. 4,118 kilograms undeclared in your aft hold. I need you to run your takeoff performance numbers again. With this." The captain looked at the numbers, then at his first officer. The color drained from their faces. The FO fumbled for his own tablet, his hands shaking. They huddled, tapping frantically. The silence at the gate was absolute, broken only by the click, click, click of the stylus. Finally, the first officer looked up, his eyes wide with horror. "Captain, the center of gravity. It's aft of the takeoff limit. Way aft." Captain Miller, a 30-year veteran, looked at Evelyn, his professional mask gone, replaced by the naked fear of a man who had just looked into his own grave. "On rotation," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "When we pulled the nose up, the CG, we wouldn't have had enough elevator authority. The nose would have just kept pitching up, or we'd have struck the tail. A tail strike at 150 knots. You'd shear off the entire tail section. We would have been uncontrollable, a crater. We'd be a crater at the end of the runway." He leaned against the counter, his legs visibly unsteady. Inspector, you didn't just ground a flight. You just saved 288 lives. My crew. My life." Evelyn nodded, her face a mask of cold fury. "Thank you for that confirmation, Captain. Your testimony will be crucial." She turned, her decision made. She keyed her radio to the airport police channel. "Officer Sullivan, this is Inspector Reed. Where is Ms. Brenda Sullivan?" "Last seen by station staff heading to the hangar, bar terminal B, ma'am. We were holding off." "Don't hold off," Evelyn ordered. "Detain her. I want her arrested, not on an airport charge. I want her held on federal charges. Reckless endangerment of an aircraft, willful falsification of federal safety manifests, and interference with a federal officer. Get her. Now." 20 minutes later, at the hangar bar, Brenda Sullivan was on her third martini. She was holding court, a small, bitter audience of off-duty baggage handlers and agents around her. "And I told her," Brenda slurred her voice loud, "I said, you can't talk to me like that. Some woman in a hoodie trying to tell me how to run my gate, so I called security. That's what you do. You call security. Dan Henderson will back me up. He'll give me a medal." Brenda Sullivan. Two figures in dark blue uniforms stepped into the circle, Officer Sullivan and Officer Chen. The bar's music seemed to fade. "What?" Brenda snapped. "I'm on break. Can't you see I'm busy." "Ma'am, you need to stand up and put your hands behind your back," Officer Sullivan said, his voice flat. Brenda laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Are you kidding me? After what she did, you should be arresting her. She threatened me. Ms. Sullivan." Sullivan said, his patience gone. "This is not a request. You are under arrest on behalf of the Federal Aviation Administration." "The what?" The click of the handcuffs was loud in the suddenly silent bar. Her co-workers, her friends, just stared, their faces a mix of shock and dawning realization. "For what?" Brenda shrieked, the alcohol and arrogance turning to panic. "For what? For a rude passenger. For 4,118 undeclared kilograms, Ms. Sullivan." Officer Sullivan said, his voice low and cold as he hauled her to her feet. "For reckless endangerment, for falsifying safety logs, for almost killing 288 people. You're not just fired, Mum. You're a federal prisoner." They walked her out. Not through a back door, but through the main concourse. It was the longest walk of her life. And as they passed Gate A23, she saw them, the passengers of TA-415, being led by a harried-looking Tim to their new Delta and American flights. They saw her. They saw the cuffs. They saw the tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. Phones were raised, whispers erupted, and standing at the front of one line, holding his children's hands, was the black father she had dismissed hours earlier. He watched her pass his face, not triumphant, but filled with a quiet, terrible and final judgment. Brenda Sullivan had been the queen of her small carpeted kingdom. Now she was just another piece of human cargo being processed by a system that she had until this very moment fatally underestimated. The shutdown of Gate A21 was not the end of the story. It was the pulling of a single loose thread that unraveled a tapestry of corruption, negligence, and systemic rot. The consequences were not swift and simple. They were a slow, crushing, and methodical cascade. This was the reckoning. Brenda Sullivan's defiant march from the gate ended at a sterile, windowless room in the airport's administrative sub-level. She was not in handcuffs, not yet, but the presence of Officer Sullivan and a silent, unblinking lawyer from the Department of Transportation made her status clear. She was no longer an employee. She was a suspect. She sat at a metal table, her union representative beside her, looking terrified and out of his depth. Across from her sat ASI Patel, her badge now on the table, and the DOT lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne. "I want to be clear, Ms. Sullivan." Thorne began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You are not here to discuss your employment status. You have been terminated by Transatlantic Air. This is a federal inquiry." "This is insane." Brenda spat her voice, still holding a trace of its old arrogance. "She set me up. That woman, Reed. It was entrapment. I've been with this airline for 24 years. My record is perfect. Perfect." ASI Patel, who had been silent, slid a thin file across the table. "Your record, Ms. Sullivan, is a work of fiction." She opened it. Inside were printouts, logs, complaints. "You have 18 passenger complaints in 6 months, Patel said. 7 alleging discriminatory language, 4 alleging procedural violations at the gate, and 2 alleging safety concerns." "Passengers lie," Brenda shot back. "They're just angry. They missed a flight or had to pay for baggage." "Do manifests lie, Ms. Sullivan?" Thorne asked. He produced a second, much thicker binder. "These are the weight and balance manifests for every flight you've dispatched for the last 90 days. And these," he said, tapping a second stack, "are the actual cargo logs from the ramp team. They don't match." Brenda's face, for the first time, lost its anger and became a mask of cold, clammy fear. "Flight TA-415, the one Dr. Reed was on," Patel said, her voice like a surgeon's scalpel. "My colleague ASI Johnson found 3 ULDs, unit load devices, in the aft cargo hold. Total weight, 4,100 kilograms. None of them," she paused, tapping the paper, "are on your final manifest, the one you signed off on." The union rep audibly gasped. "Brenda, I must have forgotten to enter them. A clerical error," Brenda stammered. "A clerical error that has occurred 38 times, Thorne said. "Always on full flights, always resulting in a tail-heavy configuration. We ran the simulation for TA-415. With the logged weight, the aircraft was viable. With the actual weight, in a 15-knot crosswind like the one you had today, the pilot would have had a 70% chance of a tail strike on takeoff. You know what that is, Ms. Sullivan?" Brenda was silent. It's when the tail of the plane smashes into the runway on ascent. Thorne continued his voice, a low, terrifying monotone. It can shear off the empennage. It can lead to a total loss of hydraulic control. It's catastrophic. You didn't just rush, Ms. Sullivan. You gambled. With 288 souls. To be on time. No, she whispered. I just... Dan Henderson, the station manager. He pushes the on-time metrics. Everyone does it. It's just bending the rules. These aren't rules, Brenda, Patel said, her voice rising with a cold fury. They are regulations written in the blood of people who died in preventable accidents, and you treated them like an inconvenience. Thorne slid a new set of papers over. This is the end of our conversation. You are being charged with willful falsification of federal safety records, reckless endangerment, and of course the 2 felonies you committed at the gate, filing a false report to law enforcement and interference with a federal officer in the conduct of her duties. Felonies. Brenda's voice cracked. You can't. I'm not a criminal. You endangered an aircraft, Ms. Sullivan. In the eyes of the U.S. government, that makes you something far worse, Thorne said. He nodded to Officer Sullivan. The click of the handcuffs was the final punctuation mark on her 24-year career. As she was led out, a ramp agent walked past, pulling her cider badge, her all-access airport ID, from its clip. The plastic snapped as he broke it in half. That more than the handcuffs was the end. Brenda Sullivan, who had ruled Gate A21 like a queen, was now just another prisoner of the system she thought she could play. Her trial was short. Faced with the mountain of video evidence from passengers, the testimony of Tim Holloway, and the damning, incontrovertible log files, her lawyer took a plea. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Esther Cole, was unsparing. In my courtroom, Ms. Sullivan, I have seen malice, greed, and desperation. But your case is a study in something I find far more repulsive hubris. You were given a position of trust, a critical link in a chain that keeps millions of people safe every single day. And you broke that chain, not for money, not for any grand reason, but because your ego was bruised by a woman in a sweatshirt. You then proceeded to lie to weaponize security, and to put your own vanity above the lives of hundreds. The court has learned you have done this in smaller ways for years. Your time is up. She was sentenced to 2 years in a federal correctional facility, but the final karmic blow came from the airline's civil court filing. Due to her felony conviction directly related to her employment, her 24 years of service were nullified. Her pension, the nest egg she had built by tyrannizing passengers, was forfeit. She left the courtroom with nothing. For Transatlantic Air, the fine was just the beginning. The $25.5 million was a rounding error. The real damage was the consent decree. Evelyn's team's audit had spread from Gate A21 to the entire Atlanta hub. They uncovered what Director Markham would later call a complete systemic breakdown of safety culture. Daniel Henderson's on-time push wasn't just a management style, it was a cult. He had a literal karma board in the break room where agents were encouraged to post wins against problem passengers, stories of charging exorbitant fees, denying boarding, and putting them in their place. This discovery was corporate dynamite. In a crisis-level boardroom meeting at Transatlantic's Dallas headquarters, CEO Richard Pierce stared grimly at his board. The stock had tumbled 14% since the story of the FAA grounding hit the news. Henderson is gone, Pierce said. Fired for cause, along with his entire senior management team at ATL. But that's not enough. The FAA is on us. Dr. Reed's report is 30 pages long, and every line is a potential lawsuit. They are forcing a consent decree on us. The room went silent. A consent decree meant the FAA would essentially be moving in. For the next 3 years, an FAA auditor, an Evelyn Reed clone, would have a permanent office at the Atlanta hub. They would have veto power over new hires, the right to conduct spot audits on any flight at any time without warning, and the power to suspend any employee on the spot. Furthermore, Pierce continued, we are mandated to retrain every single customer-facing employee in our North American and European network, all 45,000 of them. The new training module is, well, it's already being called the Reed Mandate inside the company. It's a 6-hour course on federal compliance, procedural integrity, and cultural sensitivity. A board member groaned. This is a nightmare. It's the cost of doing business, Pierce snapped. It's the cost of letting a petty tyrant like Brenda Sullivan and an arrogant fool like Dan Henderson run our most important hub. We will comply. We will pay. And we will pray. This is enough. The airline's public apology was humiliating. They were forced to take out full-page ads in major newspapers, not just apologizing for the delay, but admitting to the failure of internal compliance and discriminatory conduct at their Atlanta station. The brand, once a symbol of prestige, was now synonymous with prejudice and danger. While Brenda's world was reduced to a 6XL8 cell and Transatlantic's was reduced to groveling, Evelyn Reed's was expanding. She stood in Director Markham's office in Washington, D.C., the skyline of the Capitol behind him. Her official report was on his desk. This, Markham said, tapping the report, is a bomb. The Atlanta audit has done more to reform gateside procedure than any piece of legislation in the last decade. Every carrier, every single one, is scrambling. They're self-auditing. They're terrified. They're all asking, who is our Brenda Sullivan? Evelyn stood at parade rest. Sir, I was just following procedure. No. Markham said, a rare, thin smile on his face. You were doing your job in the face of extreme, targeted hostility. You held the line. You took the abuse, you collected the evidence, and then you brought the hammer down. That's not just procedure, that's character. He stood and walked to the window. The industry has a long memory, Evelyn. They won't forget your name. The assistant director post for the Eastern region is being vacated. The job involves overseeing all hub-level audits from Boston to Miami. He turned to her. It's yours. We need someone in that chair who's actually been in the trenches. Someone who remembers that our job isn't just about the planes. It's about the people on them. I accept, sir. Evelyn said, the weight of the promotion landing on her. Good. Oh, and one more thing. He picked up a small velvet-lined box. Your nomination for the Distinguished Service Medal was approved for, and I quote, actions under pressure that directly prevented a catastrophic aviation incident and exposed systemic safety failures. 6 months later, Assistant Director Evelyn Reed was at JFK. She was in a sharp, tailored suit, her badge clipped visibly to her belt. She was doing a random walkthrough. The air in the terminal felt different. Agents were more alert, their smiles a little less forced, their adherence to the script a little more precise. Her reputation had preceded her. She paused near a crowded gate for a flight to San Francisco. A young agent, barely out of college, was facing an angry passenger in an expensive suit. I am a Platinum Medallion member, the man boomed. My ticket will not scan. This is ridiculous. Just type it in and let me on the plane. The young agent looked flustered. He saw Evelyn watching from a distance. He took a deep, visible breath. He looked back at the passenger. Sir, I see you are a Platinum member, and I deeply apologize for this delay. The agent said, his voice firm but polite. The system has flagged your ticket for a random TSA secondary verification. For your safety and the safety of everyone on board, I am required to follow this procedure. It will only take me 1 moment to get clearance from my supervisor. I cannot and will not bypass it. Can I please offer you a bottle of water while you wait?" The passenger, taken aback by the polite ironclad refusal, deflated. "Fine. Water. But make it fast." Evelyn watched as the agent calmly picked up the phone, never once breaking protocol, never once rising to the bait. She turned and walked on. The system wasn't perfect. It would never be. There would always be another Brenda, another passenger testing the limits. But the chain was stronger now. The threads were tighter. The men and women at the gates knew with a chilling certainty that any passenger on any day, in any outfit, could be the one person holding the badge. Evelyn thought, as she stepped onto the jet bridge to inspect her next flight, was how you made the skies safe. And that right there is what we call hard karma. Brenda Sullivan's prejudice didn't just cost her a job. It cost her her freedom, and it cost her airline millions. It's a reminder that the uniform you wear, whether it's a hoodie or an airline suit, means nothing compared to the authority you've actually earned. Dr. Evelyn Reed didn't go looking for a fight, but she was damn sure ready to finish it. She proved that the most powerful person at the gate isn't the one with the microphone. It's the one with the badge, the one who understands that safety and respect are non-negotiable. What did you think of Evelyn's response? Was Brenda's punishment deserved, or was it too much? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about underdogs, karma, and justice, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more real-life drama every week. Thanks for watching.